the media told us that George, Maurice Lester Hall, who was with him, and Shawanda Hill, all convicted felons, by the way, arrived on the scene. They met coincidentally. I have footage that shows that Maurice and George arrived there together. And I had suspected that Maurice was a snitch, and through a FOIA document now have proof that at one point he was a snitch. And when I
Who
called
was he snitched to, the Fed?
the MPD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was arrested at Harbor Heights, which is an extension of the Salvation Army, which rehabilitates, I think mostly men, and from drugs. And he had a place there, and they found a semi-automatic gun, and he had tried to hide some between his butt cheeks. And I believe that he spoke to me because in that moment, like now he's not responding to my calls because the Floyd family turned their backs on him. He didn't make any of the $27 million.
Wow.
He didn't get any of that money, unlike Darnella Frazier, who her Black Lives, she raised $700,000. And of course, she won a Pulitzer Prize.
Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I'm joined once again by my friend, Maryam Henein. Let me refresh your memory in case you missed her first appearance on this show. She's an incredible investigative journalist. She's a public health expert. She's a documentarian. She's an eco-entrepreneur. She directed a great documentary, which I highly recommend, called Vanishing of the Bees. She's the founder of the health and wellness magazine and awesome marketplace called Honey Colony, which you can find online. This is her second time on the show, as I mentioned, and I welcome her back with open arms. Maryam, thank you so much for beaming in with me again.
Faust, what a beautiful introduction. I got the shivers.
Oh,
thank you. That's a good sign.
Thank you. How have you been?
Wow, it's crazy, right? It's almost, we're on the heels of June. We're on the heels of 2-year anniversary in regards to George Floyd. So it's been 2 years that I've been investigating this. And since we last spoke, I was in Miami, and now I'm not in Miami. And still didn't realize, well, you'll find out soon, moving is quite disruptive, especially moving to a new state.
Yeah.
A new state of mind, a new state of being, a literal new state.
Yeah.
So for instance, when I went to get my Florida ID, I had purposely kept an extra California ID because I've been trying to ward off the real ID.
Yeah.
And they snatched my identification without, I had not still been accepted in Florida, and they clipped it. And I felt like a cow being clipped, and it became very official that I was, after 23 years of being in China-fornia, I'm now in Florida. Yes. So,
well, how did that feel, though? Was it liberating at all?
At that moment, it was actually very violating because I'm now in the federal system. And the thing that I've sensed is there is very much a police state vibe here, more so than I would have
imagined.
Yeah. So, we'll see. It's still, I'm in St. Augustine, which is the oldest city in the country. And I firmly believe that it's a time portal. And I'm still asking the universe, please, show me, why am I here?
Right.
So.
Well, you have to trust your intuition that led you there. And, I did an awesome vlog on St. Augustine. It is an incredible time. It is an incredible portal. Absolutely. It is. It's got a lot of different energy going on.
Right?
Some of it amazing, some of it very, not so amazing, but
I'd like to know what you mean.
But it's an incredible place. It really is kind of a time warp.
It's a hodgepodge of different times. And I came to this house where I am I remote viewed it. I energetically went into the house. I had never been to the city,
Mhm.
which is quite cuckoo, right? I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to this city I've never
Yeah.
been in. And just to tell the audience why we're saying it's a portal, in a lot of cities, when they cover up a different era, whether it's the mud piles or it's hidden up. Whereas here, if
Mm.
you go downtown, there's like, you can go down a street and get a sense of the pirate
Oh
era
yeah.
vibe, of the Spanish colonial, of the slave
They have
vibe.
the
And it's
slave platforms right there, which I, also go into. My God, talk about some dank ass energy.
right.
Step onto those things, but it's palpable. I'm
And
like,
how about the
oh
star fort?
yeah. Um, it's crazy. But I think that I believe that you've gone there for a reason, and look, Florida has its pros and cons, and but I don't, it's like the way things are these days, it's really hard to get away from any kind
Right.
of police state unless you're really living on your own, far, far away from civilization. It's kind of the norm, even in a state like Florida, which, at the same time, there's pros and cons to everything, and it's just the way that you see things. And, I would just say, take the good with the bad, because it's much better than fucking California or this insane asylum called New York City, where everyone is lining up for their fourth. Now that the alert is high again, the runny nose alert, I call it.
Right.
I'm like, what?
What's
What?
ends now?
I don't know. I call it the runny nose because basically that's what's going on. Everyone's like, I think maybe. I'm like,
And
can you imagine, like, if people showed, like, 2 years ago, if someone came up to you and said, like, I don't have any symptoms, but I have the flu. Like,
right.
what would you say? You'd be like, how the fuck do you know that what would make you think that you have the flu if you have zero symptoms? You really have to be kind of mind washed into this new way of thinking. And it only applies to what. So whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, people who think that this has gone away, where it's just a little respite because
Yeah.
they know that we're exhausted and the elections are coming up and their mail-in voting is coming up,
Yep.
and this whole WHO treaty is around the corner.
That's
So
happening right now.
yeah, it's interesting to see. And initially, when Trump pulled out of the WHO, and the initial reaction is, oh, that's a good thing. However, if you pull out, then the United States doesn't have a say. And then who's running the show? Billy Boy Gates. And
But what's worse, though, it's like, from the pot to the fire. I mean, what's worse, being out of it, or, I mean, I'd rather be out of it and let the hornet's nest buzz all at once. But the United States would lead the way in that respect. But then you literally would change every time the politics of this country change and the leadership changes. We're back in, we're back out, we're back in, we're back out. You know what I mean? Like, but the way that the organization, I mean, attempted to handle what happened in 2020 was a complete and utter disaster. I mean, and by any standard.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, so why would you want them to have charge of anything? They've done a piss poor job of everything. You know what I mean? Like, they're a glorified, like, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that pushes the word, not vagina, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately.
So yeah, but
Yeah, and in regards to the flip flop between different people in charge or different presidents, so that you can do something and then undo it, and then there's
yeah,
no progress, it's devolution. So for instance, under Trump, they had launched the China initiative and acknowledged that there was a lot of ciphering of intellectual
sexual property.
property
Yeah.
and espionage. So if you're familiar at all with Charles Lieber, who I've been covering, um,
The scientist out of
the Harvard professor
out
who
of Harvard, the Harvard professor. Yeah.
who I call the nanotech king. So they go hard, like January 2020, January 28th, they say espionage, and in ultimately he's a prized asset, and now they're trying to acquit him. So I went to look on the Department of Justice to do research on what is this China initiative, and it's literally a 404. So the government is literally scrubbing a la Ministry of Truth
Wow.
under a president. It's 404, and have gone as far as to say this guy never worked in China, even though he has 11 China patents, and he's seen on camera in an interrogation saying that he literally took money in paper bags from China. So the amount of gaslighting and literal Ministry of Truth, of course, with Nina in the helm, which is like, your job is really to go after truth and you're the disinformation, right?
Oh my God. Don't get me started on her.
Okay, we don't have to go.
Oh my God. That's just, I mean, it's a disaster. It's a dumpster fire. And I mean, people are literally clueless. I mean, they just don't, and I don't know how much they want to know. I had a great, he's a researcher, he's a scientist, incredible guy. His name's Johan Cools. He lives in Belarus.
Okay.
And he's written this incredible scientific paper, but, he talks about how the media, is the amount of damage that the media is causing by being so, such lapdogs and so complicit in all of this and the terror that they spread. But one of the things he talks about is how people who are indoctrinated into this way of thinking and traumatized by it, they have no capacity to hear outside of it. And that's obviously very true. You can present people all the evidence that they could ever ask for, and they will literally take it in and say, I don't believe you. You know what I mean? Like, how many times has that happened to you in the last 2 years, where you're just like, you're kind of left speechless at the fact that everything that you've just shown, which should have been in a normal world, incontrovertible evidence, or at least something to consider, was just dismissed, completely dismissed, because it cannot go into that kind of an amygdala that's been so traumatized, for lack of a better word.
Right. I mean, they bank on people eliciting an emotional response that supersedes logic. And also, like, for instance, I'll give you, I don't want to trash talk, but I'll give you an example. So for instance, you're well aware that Dr. Brian Ardis has come forward and this documentary about the venom. So he, as a consequence, has been disinvited from tours by people who were themselves rejected for challenging the mainstream. So I call it the piggy effect, as a reference to the Lord of the Flies, that these kids who set out to do something revolutionary, and next thing you know, they're throwing Piggy off of the cliff, and they're the same shit that they try to avoid. So if you're not going to sit and have a debate and explore possibility of let's say the snake venom or something else, and just reject the person, I mean, that it really shows what is so lacking on this planet is consciousness, is self-awareness, is looking at your own shadow. So you can be praising Jesus all day long, but if you're not being the change that you want to see, and keeping yourself in check, this to me is the number one thing that is lacking, this sense of wisdom. We used to look to our elders, and now it's really it's a sense of consciousness that's missing. And this, this disconnect, it's like all of these things that someone should have been doing prior to detoxing from this from hell are things that you should have been doing anyway. This is your temple. And I personally refuse to let the powers that be poison it, because it is really a vessel, and it can house or help elevate your consciousness, right? What you put in the body.
I mean, I'm still in shock and flabbergasted at the amount of people who, I mean, like, look, so, I tell people all the time, if if somebody came up to you with a briefcase with $1 million in it, and they were like, listen, we want you to help us save yourself and save the world, you would look at that $1 million and you would start to listen to what they have to say in a way that was going to bias you in a way that would be favorable to what they presented you. Okay. That is kind of human nature. Like I tell people all the time, if somebody tells me something about my son, I am going to always hear it through a bias. I love my son. There's
Right.
nothing anyone could tell me, and there's nothing that he could do that would take that away. I'm going to hear everything through that bias, through that
Right.
prism. And it's the same thing with fear. It's the same thing with too much political loyalty on either side. You start to hear things, and inevitably they get filtered through a bias. And so you have to continually be so conscious of yourself.
Right.
You can check and say, if I'm afraid to talk shit about Republicans, then I've stepped in. I have 1 foot way too close on the wrong side. You know what I'm saying? Like I always keep 1 foot on each side because I see the corruption in both parties, and I'm not afraid to call it out at all. I have no political loyalty, and I love it. I'm more aligned probably with what you can consider, I guess, on the right. But 2 years ago, I was for Bernie Sanders considered extreme left. So it's like these things are rearranged by the media and by the corporations and by the politics of the day. And so it's like that's all bullshit. And I'm for people. I'm for live and let live, and that's my
Me too.
basic motto.
Faust, you are not the average, and you have consciousness. I would argue, if this sounds sexist, we really need more men. We need our men that are not imbibing endocrine disruptors and estrogen mimickers, and that are guiding the way. I mean, I personally am more traditional, and I think that men and women are complementary. And I just acknowledge that it's not the average, it's not norm to have a sense of consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd like to help people cultivate. And it seems that it's more in the woo-woo category,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but that is really where I find the truth lies, because it's all these shades of gray. To be able to acknowledge and articulate or be aware of your own biases, and kind of like sit here and look at yourself. It's very, very lacking on this planet. Ego is running amok.
Yes. Yeah, and terror is running amok in many, many ways. I'm blown away by. I try to reach out to someone who I see is, kind of breaking out of their shell and kind of starting to shed some of the conformities that they have been living by. And I'm met with abject terror. I'm like, whoa, man. You know what I mean? Like, what are you so scared of? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I understand that, people, if you're an actor, obviously these days, there are repercussions to use your voice in a way that, look at what happened to Gina. She was one of the most popular characters on that show. She was tweeting or whatever about the tyranny going on widespread, and they canned her from the show. And don't get me wrong, she's better off. I think that's my opinion. I look at that industry and what's happening with it, and I don't want to go near it with a 75-foot pole, let alone be employed by it and subject myself to. I'm not even going to get into it, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah, but you're right, though. It's
luckily someone caught her. Luckily she had created. She has enough of a reputation. I'm not a celebrity, but when I was dropped by the side that the left or the Democrats. There was really no one to catch me.
Yeah.
And now it's become so normalized. There's no one, someone that's also censored said, oh, no one cares about you, Maryam, which was hurtful, but it's this it's a balance, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
want to be a victim, but yet I personally have cancel PTSD, and there
Yeah.
is no one you could run to. It's interesting how some people can circumvent or triumph over, and some others don't. I don't know what exactly is the magic formula.
Maybe, well, I mean, I would argue that you do. You have an idea of what the magic formula is, but you have to apply it to yourself, because I know you just well enough to know that you understand how this reality is manifested, and I think that,
Construct.
of course, but I think you have every ability to transcend all this. I believe in you 110%, and I
Thank you. I
think that you're
think
just finding your new place in this, in this kind of new modern era that we're living in, because there's more and more. I see so many places popping up where I think you would definitely be right at home at and welcomed into. So
that's nice. I could tell you this event that I just went to, the people that I connected or that gravitated to me after my talk are all like heart-based, and they're yearning for authenticity, and they can acknowledge or they can recognize consciously or subconsciously when someone's not wearing a mask on top
yeah.
of a mask, right? Because there's masks on top of masks. And to be authentic and to be willing to be raw and just be, so that is refreshing.
Yeah. And you're going to keep finding, I think, people like that meeting you in this new place that you've come to, that you moved to. I think that you're going to keep as long as you continue to renew and not get stuck in that path. And I understand, I've lost a lot of friends in the last 2 years. I've had a lot of people disown me simply for speaking what I thought was
Right.
the truth, and what I thought I was, within my rights to share my opinion about. But we've come to such a polarized time that some people decided that I was not worth keeping around, and that hurts, and the larger scale it happens to someone, the more traumatic it can be. But you absolutely have the tools to transcend it, and you are transcending it. And I just want to remind you of that, because you're far too incredible to be pigeonholed or get stuck in that. Keep your eyes forward and keep your head up, and things are going to keep showing up for you. You're welcome.
It is trust, and I'm due for another plant medicine ceremony.
Yeah, I got one coming up. Yeah.
I'm talking about personally Aya. I would like to do Aya again.
That's what I'm doing.
The last time I did it was I've done it a dozen times, was in Corona, California.
Oh boy, there's a lot of ceremonies going on in California. It's crazy. God, maybe not enough, but I hear there's a lot.
Yeah, it's an incredible plant. I highly recommend it. Of course, you have to be called, and it's they call it, I think, like combo. I think it's considered an ordeal medicine. It's definitely not easy, and it's work. You're doing work.
It is. And you can't really, I tell people like, oh, you went without me. I'm like, dude, I can't chase you around to do this with me. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of thing. And you have to be called to, you have to pursue it yourself. I'm not going to, like, I can't just sign you up and tell you where to be. Like, if you want to do this, you got to do it. You know what I mean? And if you want to do it, it'll find you, it'll meet you halfway, but don't ask me to fucking, make your travel plans for you. Okay. It's your journey to go on. But anyway, let's get into, you've been doing some very, very intense work. Did you see, it's so funny, we're having this interview, of course, and I just saw Candace Owens released her.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Now
And I was
know
wondering
why she wasn't responsive when I approached her, but my documentary is a lot different, and hopefully it's just, I have even been shadow banned on my Give, Send, Go. So
Mhm.
I know like the rhythm of like, because I'm just trying to cover my costs because I've
Right.
been so attacked to pay my editor and to cover all the footage that has never seen the light of day on this
Mhm.
planet. And even Give, Send, Go, it went through like 23 days of no one giving me even
Yeah.
like $5, $10. I'm like, what's going on here? Even though I've done big shows. And so
Yeah.
that's been a little bit discouraging, I have to say.
Well, we'll include a link. Is it still
Oh yeah, it's
okay? So
still,
we'll include a link in the video description. Anyone who feels called to be generous and can donate.
and right now I will offer you an advanced copy of my a book. I will send you a book in exchange for a
Cool.
donation as well. So yeah, I'll put the Give, Send, Go there. And a lot is happening. And that's the irony that people might have George Floyd fatigue, but the 2-year anniversary is on its way. Every single day, there's documents that are being leaked. I'm speaking to the lawyers of the officers, to Derek's appeal lawyer. I've
Mhm.
contacted Maurice Lester Hall, who was with him. I'm speaking to a contact within Cup Foods. I can say with confidence that I know more about this case than anyone on this planet because of the FOIA documents, because of the relentless 2-year investigation. It will be 2 years. And so I'm very detail oriented. And so the amount of juicy exclusive information,
Yeah.
and I purchased all the exhibits from the courts. So for instance, the media told us that Maurice Lester Hall, who was with him, and Shawanda
Mhm.
Hill, all convicted felons, by the way, arrived on the scene. They met coincidentally. I have footage that shows that Maurice and George arrived there together.
Mhm.
And I had suspected that Maurice was a snitch, and through a FOIA document now have proof that at one point he was a snitch. And when I
Who was he
called him,
snitched to the Fed?
the MPD,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he was arrested at Harbor Heights, which is an extension of the Salvation Army, which rehabilitates, I think mostly men,
Mhm.
and from drugs. And he had a place there, and they found a semi-automatic gun, and he had tried to hide some in between his butt cheeks,
Hmm.
and then was approached to be an informant, and at
Right.
one point was an informant. Maybe he stopped being one, or he stopped responding to them. So when I called him, found his information through the FOIA document, he thought I was a journalist he'd spoken to before,
Oh,
and gave me an excuse of like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you about the photo shoot. And then I was like, no, I'm
photos. Yeah.
not that person. And I believe that he spoke to me because in that moment, like now he's not responding to my
Right.
calls because the Floyd family turned their backs on him. He didn't make any of the $27 million.
Wow.
He didn't get any of that money, unlike Darnella Frazier, who her Black life, she raised 700,000. And of course she won a Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, let's give you a Pulitzer Prize for your journalism. Now people like me,
Right.
you, um, for being there at the right time and arguably was told to be there.
Yeah.
And so he was, Maurice, I think, kind of bitter because the authorities were messing with him, and offered or asked me if I knew anyone was interested in purchasing footage of him and
Oh.
George at Chuck E. Cheese. Um, so anyway, he did tell me a lot of things. We spoke about 3-4 times, and then
Mhm.
he stopped. He stopped responding to me.
Hmm. And so you are knee deep in you're writing a book, or have you finished
Oh
the
yeah,
book?
I am on my Derek Chauvin chapter,
Okay.
and so I'm about 80% complete. And unfortunately, I've been very pressured to time it with this upcoming trial, but it
Yeah.
does not look like I will be able to finish it in time
Yeah.
because I've been actively investigating while I've been researching, and then I've been doing a bazillion other things and moving and so on. So yes, I have a book coming out. I have a publisher, which is very exciting, Logo Sophia, that saw me on Mel K and reached out to me. And after myriad rejections and nothing, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not my writing or my research, it's the topic. I'm
Of
very
course. Yeah.
pleased. And now I am trying to manifest a executive producer to have a little bit of clout. I have an editor and a rough cut, and hopefully this weekend or soon thereafter, I'll be narrating it and taking it to the next step. And the trial, I will likely go to Minneapolis because I believe, someone told me if you really want to know the truth, then I have to go poke around. I was told that
Yeah.
it's very dangerous because at the heart of what's going on, the real story is
Mhm.
money laundering operation involving the Mexican cartel and
No
the
shit.
feds that is underneath this all. And the MPD, there was also the Department of Justice just did a investigation into the MPD, and just last week put out the results of their investigation. I have to say, they are a very corrupt police force, and they were looking, the MPD are people in the activism against police brutality, have been trying for a long time. And it's like they knew that they needed something on camera. It's amazing psychologically. Like, I just came from a talk, and I know that once someone is put on stage, I'm put on stage, then all of a sudden that validates, or it gives some type of celebrity status or elevates, right? So it's very interesting psychologically at, what happens. Um, so
Yeah. So you, I mean, it's so obviously we know fentanyl was a big part of George's life, and if you
well, of his death,
and his death, yeah,
not
unfortunately,
anymore, according to the mainstream. It had nothing to do with his death.
that's what that's what the mainstream says. But my
Yeah.
question is, you know, the fact that they were trying to make purchases at this bodega, um, which is the source of, the cops were called because he was at the bodega, right? And
Foods
he
grocery store.
it was there. What I don't know why I call it a bodega.
Oh,
I've been in New York too long.
like that.
Yeah, but he was obviously fucked up. Like, I see the video of him in there, and he's all fucked up. He's like, clearly he's on drugs. I mean, I know what someone looks like on drugs. Plus, I'm an actor, so
Yes.
I have to be able to then act like I'm on drugs, and that's exactly how I would act. I mean, I'm laughing because obviously I have experiences doing both, but not with fentanyl, but I mean, like, both being on drugs and acting like I'm on drugs. Anyway, uh, there's an aside for you. Anyway, so but then and they had fake money. They had counterfeit money, right?
So let me say a few things to
Yeah.
that. One, there's a chapter in the book about Cup Foods, and you can see their relationship with the cops, and they are in gangland, and the Bloods are there. So the camera that is across the street, the milestone, was put in place to keep an eye on Cup Foods, the surveillance cameras outside of the shop. If you think, the thing is, like, you have to break it down and acknowledge that people don't pay attention to details. It doesn't matter anymore. So Maurice tried to purchase an iPad with fake money that day. I would like to know why the cops were not called on Maurice or Shawanda to investigate. Also, the Secret Service is usually in charge of counterfeit money. It never involves police. It doesn't I could have a 20, fake 20, you could have, doesn't mean you end up dying, right?
Right.
So when I applied for a FOIA from the Secret Service, which took me a year to receive, the response, the memorandum that they sent me was in reference to there's a bill that Maurice rips up and throws down on the floor, and then there's the bill that George handed. There was no mention of the dollar bills and the $20 bills that were shoved between the seats in the Mercedes Benz. The memorandum doesn't even venture to talk about where does this money come from, when in January, I believe 23rd, Minnesota State, Minneapolis intercepted $800,000 in $1 fake bills made in China. So nobody gives a crap about where the money comes from. And if anyone gave a crap about this Black man, we would be wondering and talking about the fact that fentanyl kills more people than even bloated COVID numbers, and is made by the Mexican cartel with ingredients made in China. And I interviewed a DEA investigator who said this is like playing Russian roulette with your life. Now, arguably, there's something else in the drugs. One of the officers at the federal trial acknowledged that oftentimes there's things that are laced that are undetectable, and certainly if you're not asking for it. I personally think there's possibility that there was cyanide, and that is more conducive to the way he died, as opposed to if you really break down how the reaction from fentanyl. Obviously, there was also meth, and it was a mixture. And I would go as far as to say that possibly George knew, and this was a self-sacrifice. We'll make you Rodney 2.0. He's beholden to the Mexican cartel. If anyone knows anything about the Sinaloa, it's not to be messed with. Also, arguably, Derek Chauvin was activated. Now, I'd like to tell, in putting this chapter together, this guy's a ghost, and the government put forth early on a 79-page personal file. In my 25 years as a journalist, I have never seen that the government, here's a public file. So all the articles
they had that big of a file on Chauvin?
Yeah, it has. Even he graduated as a cook. So we go back to elementary, and their prior work jobs, all the numbers led to nowhere. But what is very interesting is that Derek served at Fort Benning, which is AKA the School of America's School of Assassins, and also in Germany. So how do you go from being ostensibly a veteran to working for a club with ties to the Mexican cartel?
Right.
And if this was a personal hit, because why did he continue to put his knee on George after the guy passes out? At one point in the video, which I've watched all the videos, there's many angles, hundreds of times, when Derek comes to the scene, there's only one line where George goes, "He know me, man." Yeah. That is the only instance of any hint that these two guys knew each other, as they both worked for the same club. And yes, it's a big club. And yes, we're told that one worked outside and one worked inside. But I have documentation that shows that they were part of the protocol was to keep close communication between the bouncers and the off-duty officers, which there were more than Derek. He was the main one.
Right.
And so that doesn't make sense. I have worked at a club, and certainly I didn't know everybody, but I knew their faces, especially someone
right. Especially you work there long enough and you get to know people. You're walking in and out, you say hello. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely a familiarity that is undeniable, especially when you have the same employer and basically both doing the same thing. If he was a bouncer and he was an off-duty cop there to help, guard then they have a similar function. Go figure. How ironic. Um,
Right.
but so when you say activated, I think
Mm.
that you should. I've been telling everyone to watch is it Kathy or Katie? Kathy,
I've interviewed Kathy and I've
the,
spoken to her
yeah.
about
So I've been trying to get everyone to watch this documentary. It's called
trans,
the Kathy O'Brien story, right?
trans the movie.
Trance. It's called Trance. It is the Kathy O'Brien
Yes,
story. She's an
yes,
MK Ultra survivor.
yes.
MK Ultra was considered a conspiracy theory for many years until the documents came out proving that it was, I think, the fourth name of the same program, which is basically a torture mind control program that the CIA and elements of the government were doing. You could argue illegally, using children, using men, women, and experimenting with massive amounts of psychoactive substances and trauma. And I mean, it's the absolute epitome of everything vile you can imagine. It is taking the human psyche and subjecting it to whatever horrors you can imagine in order to get it to break and be bendable to your will. Basically, that is what the the goals of MK Ultra and its predecessors were. If you want to learn more about it, you have to watch this documentary called Trance. There are very few survivors of these programs.
Right.
Kathy O'Brien is one of them, and she was able to get over the incredible amount of trauma she was subject to, and inform people about the program that she was part of.
Yeah.
Fact, not
I
theory.
highly, I highly recommend watching the film. And if people want to go to Rockfin, they could see my interview with Adrian, the producer, and Kathy. And then
Oh, cool.
I have spoken to Kathy apart from in regards specifically to Derek and the possibility. I'm currently trying to find someone that can tell me a little bit about Fort Benning. In 2000, the Army supposedly gave over a responsibility to the Department of Justice. And as mentioned, it was referred to the School of Americas, but also as the School of Assassins. And many Mexican cartel participants were trained at Fort Benning. He was there in 2004. But again, how does a veteran, the fact that everyone threw this guy under the table, because I don't understand why he continues to put his knee on George after the guys clearly passed out.
Yeah.
Today, Thomas Lane, who was a rookie on the fourth day, pled guilty. So he will be serving 3 years. I also believe that this was a drill during the federal trial, which was very interesting. It was like the MPD training manual was on trial. And
Mm-hmm.
it was very granular. The fact that a lot of the participants were rookies, I believe that
Yeah.
it was a drill, and they said that they had devised a duty to intervene exercise, but that they had not yet put it into motion. And I
Right.
would argue to say, was this a duty to intervene exercise? Whenever there is a jurisdiction agencies, like at 10:30, this became a crime scene, the George Floyd.
Right.
That's not typical. If there was something happened here, that you would bring the FBI and the BCA
Right.
and the MPD, and they were there on the scene till 5 a.m, and yet nobody looked into the source of the drugs or the cash.
Right. But
So it's
it
a lot of,
goes to it goes to the fact that, like every other investigation that you can look into, that has been deliberately, what's the word, obfuscated or made.
usurped.
Yeah. And that happens usually when there's already a plan in place. I just did a show about 9/11 and the incredible deception that went on that day. And when you have trauma involved, you can misdirect people very easily. And there was quite a spectacle of trauma that happened that day, and quite a lot of lives lost because of it. But
Right.
it's just, you know what I mean? Like, people are like, why? You literally have an arrow pointing that way, saying, go, you know, go that way. And meanwhile, everything that's truly happening is that way. And that's like, you know, in these situations, it's really hard to convince people that they actually look that way because they were told to look that way, and misdirected. You know, people don't want to imagine that that's possible. Obviously, we're living in a time where that's become very, very evident. You have to have a little bit of humility to step back and say, son of a bitch, you know what? I was fooled, or I believed that, you know, that this was the way it was. And okay, forgive yourself, but now look at it with fresh eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
come back
Yeah.
to yourself and take another look at things, because things don't seem to add up the way they're supposed to. And so clearly, my opinion about George Floyd is there's obviously something going on, because
Right.
I tell people all the time, like, listen, people are killed every day in this country. People are shot every day in this country. People, you know, people die. There's on average about 300 people every day who are killed by gunshot wounds. Now, how many of those do you hear on the news every day? You don't. Until the media decides that something is worth telling you about for their own agenda, you're not going to hear anything about it. And we know what happened with the media and George Floyd. It was a bonanza. And so in order to orchestrate a bonanza of that fucking size, you need you need a lot of parties involved, right? Just like
Right.
9/11. I just showed my friend, oh, I don't know, like a 10-minute compilation of news footage from around the world of everyone reporting on the fact that World Trade Center building number 7 had collapsed. The only problem was with all the time zones they were coordinating, it hadn't collapsed yet. It was an hour. For a full hour, they were reporting all these different news broadcasts, the BBC, all these different languages, that World Trade Center 7 had collapsed due to the fire and the structural damage. Even though no steel building in the history of mankind has ever collapsed due to a fire, ever, they all supposedly, oh, it was just bad reporting. I mean, look at it. The building had some smoke coming out of it, so clearly it was going to come down. I'm like, what? No, that building wasn't hit by a plane. How did it even get on fire? Okay, so maybe some debris hit it. Why can't they just put it out? This is the NYPD. These guys are they're the best of the best. They could put any fire out. And I showed like 10 minutes of footage of buildings. I mean, skyscrapers engulfed in flames that of course never came down, because it's physically impossible to melt steel with an office fire. It doesn't get hot enough. And so, but the fact that the news agencies were reporting on it for a full hour before it even happened, that tells you the scale and coordination of the
Right.
conspiracy that went on, you know. And
What?
so with George Floyd, we saw that same kind of mobilization to get this news out there, outrage as many people as possible about it. And it was like the drums were beat incessantly about it. And whenever that happens, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, this is, always there's an agenda. Always. The question is, what was their agenda? And they probably had more than one.
Well, it was the event that ushered in the color revolution. Someone like I highly recommend watching the Trayvon Martin hoax by Joel Gilbert, who has been a colleague and a consultant, encouraging me to follow these hunches of mine. So someone like him believes that these are a dime a dozen, and that Benjamin Crump, the supposed civil rights attorney, who's really an ambulance chasing shyster crook,
Mm-hmm.
he committed hands down witness fraud. You can see that in the Trayvon Martin hoax. So Joel believes that these cases are a dime a dozen, and then they just choose one and co-opt it.
Mm-hmm.
However, I believe that this was set in motion and that was prepared. Now, why do I believe that? One, I believe that the I can't breathe slogan, which was recirculated from 2014 with Eric
Right.
Garner, and also represented, Eric Garner was represented by Benjamin Crump, was used as a FU as we were literally the day after May 25th, bringing in mask mandate. So on the scene, Thomas Lane, who's a rookie, is wearing a baby blue face diaper. There's one bystander, and then the supposed EMT. Then on the steps of the presser, the steps of City Hall, being hosted by the Trudeau knockoff Mayor Jacob Fry, everyone on the steps is masked overnight. So you have people wearing their face diapers,
Yeah.
saying, chanting, "I can't breathe," which is just ridiculous,
I
right?
mean, the mantra itself is
Right.
just terrible. I mean, I heard it in New York City. My heart went out to those people because they just had no idea what they have been galvanized into. And they have no idea what walking around all day, every day, uttering the words, "I can't breathe," does to a human body, a human spirit, a human soul. You know, and I felt very bad for what was happening to
Right.
them, you know.
So I believe this incident was used to go from virus to violence at a time where we were getting sick of these lockdowns. And
That's
next
right.
thing you
Yeah.
know, abracadabra, now they're going on and the country is burning. Also, I know that the Black Lives Matter because they're the number one vaccine hesitant. They are
Right.
ka-ching, so we have to go after them. So you can find NIH papers where they admit to conducting focus groups and looking to the Black Lives Matter messaging to look and see how they can get those needles into Black people. So I don't, they looked at the Black Lives Matter because in reality, Black lives don't matter. Arguably, none of our lives matter because we're not all guinea pigs. So I think that this was sold as we're going to get more vaccines into Black people's arms. And that was kind of the overriding thrust of it all, given the evidence that I found. So George, we're going to make you Rodney 2.0. Keep saying, "I can't breathe," knowing that someone's going to drug him either willingly or unwillingly. He took part in a self-sacrifice. And if you listen to everything that's being said, that he says with the lens just temporarily that he knew, I'm through. Say, "Reese, I love you," which is Maurice, then consider that as a possibility, that he was beholden to the Mexican cartel. Everything was locked down. And so these money laundering operations, these supposed legitimate businesses had nothing to run their money through. You could just watch the Ozarks to see how that plays out. Also, the fact that a year prior, almost to the day, he gets arrested, George. He also says his mama just died, which is a lie. She died in 2018. I get it. He doesn't want to go back to jail.
Right.
And this time he swallows OxyContin, also made by the Mexican cartel, also ends up having a near overdose. So they could have said, that thing that you did, do it again.
Right.
So it is possible, given that he's been in a porn, he's a
for money
actor,
no doubt about it,
that he played along and was used. Perhaps they just didn't know that he was going to die, and they compartmentalize, right? They use useful idiots, and this is like an episode of Reno 911.
It's there's absolutely something to what you're saying. I don't it's really hard to know. It'll be impossible to prove, and even if you could prove it, they would find a way to deny it. But clearly this was taken and made an international incident, and used, and I think personally, Hillary Clinton says it all the time, you never let a good crisis come and go without putting it to good use, and she's queen at this. But back to your documentary.
Yeah.
So tell me what, so I'm gonna include a link.
Have you seen the trailer?
I did watch the trailer. Yes. Yeah.
Very proud
We're
of
gonna
it.
show the trailer too. It looks really, really good. And I was really fascinated to see more. I didn't know the extent of the involvement with the cartel and the fentanyl. I knew he was obviously on drugs, but then again, that's been washed by the
Well,
mainstream media. Yeah.
early on, Maya Santa Maria, who was the front woman at El Nuevo, went on Spanish TV. And I have a lot of clips on my Gap TV channel. And she says in Spanish, he's a sacrifice. And then she actually adds the word literalmente. She actually adds the word literal sacrifice. And it was known that Maya worked with the cops and worked, ironically, my contact at Cup Foods, one of the four owners, they're Palestinian Arabs that got caught up in this. And there's a cover up involving Cup Foods as well that I will leave for my book. But I was speaking to one of the brothers that has been forthright with me for whatever reason. And he was in jail. And because I said, what do you think about Maya? This was months and months ago. And he goes, oh, that witch. And I laughed and I said, why? So he was in jail, ironically, with her ex-husband, well, her now ex-husband, who had screwed him over in like a setup. So when I said, well, is she involved with the Mexican cartel? And he's like, sweetie, she is the Mexican cartel. She's a media mogul, and she has the airwaves of Telemundo and the Spanish airwaves. So she could definitely influence the narrative in that community.
Yeah.
And initially said that it was one big familia, and then she changed. So early on, and again, like what you said is like they'll put false trails, right? And people will be distracted and like, look over here. So was that part of it? But early on, David Pinney, who is a Black employee of El Nuevo, gave a 50-minute interview with Jeff Piggy of CBS and said that they got Derek and George worked together and they butted heads. And then 24 hours later, it was recanted. So let's say I as a journalist, can I license that footage? Oh no, it's been taken off the airwaves, so you're not able to license it. So they put the things out, so for the record, but no one's paying attention. So this guy recants his testimony and says that he's bad with faces and that he confused George for someone else, which in itself is a racist comment, like all Black people look the same. Meanwhile, he's your fucking employer. He's a 6'6" and he's your boss.
He's kind of unmistakable. Yeah.
Yeah, you confused him. So that was covered up. And there was never any mention of it again. Now, also what I tried to do and in my book is, well, how can I link Derek with the Mexican cartel with El Nuevo? So there was one incident in which he apprehended a gang member. I found it in a 404 article, and then I applied to get the actual police incident. What I found very interesting is that under appearance, which is of the people that were apprehended, the gang member, appearance is where you would have the tattoos, which would give away that they're Mexican gangs. So they covered that up. They covered that up purposely. They even covered up the name El Nuevo, except I knew it was El Nuevo. And then I found in the 404 article that they were part of the Sureño gang. And the one person that was apprehended didn't even have a United States ID. He was from Mexico. That's the one instance that I can tie it together. Also, Derek worked for another club with ties to the Mexican cartel. No one has reported on that. Now, Derek is also wanted for tax evasion because he's money laundering. This is unaccounted money.
Wait,
90,000.
Chauvin is wanted for tax evasion.
Yeah. So there's an upcoming trial in July in Washington County. So I called and I started looking, because I'm on my chapter on Derek, to see where are we at. The judge just died at 66. He's left behind 6 grandchildren,
Wow.
children and 6 grandchildren. So they put their signature there. So did this guy get offed because he's gone after child trafficking, sex trafficking, he's gone after drug dealing, and he was going to implicate the Mexican cartel?
Mm,
And I was told, Maryam, you need protection. Have you seen the Sinaloa deface someone?
yeah.
So there are ties. The fact that no one has come forth, the only person that spoke to me about Derek is his old sergeant officer at the age. He said that Derek was 19, but when I crunched the numbers, that doesn't make sense. He was 23.
Hmm.
It's very interesting to basically have a veteran that we're supposed to respect end up working for a money laundering club. It's wild,
And
like,
he was wanted for tax evasion.
yeah.
When you're a first, like if you just the video I've seen of him, he looks like a cop that he looks like someone who was picked on. First of all, he looks like
He was.
like a low status, like he has issues, and if he bullies people and he hurts people, it's because he's been so clearly hurt. It's all over his face. Now maybe I'm imagining things because I know what he did, or whether it was on purpose or not is another question. But just the way that he responds to people who are talking to him in those videos, to me, is that comes across very clear.
So
yeah.
just yesterday, I learned that apparently the day prior, on May 24th, there was an athlete that Derek effed up, Black athlete, and injured him. And supposedly the rumor is that he was intimidated by Black people. That's the rumor. However, and also, like, there's one clip also on my Gab TV of he was married to a Miss Minneapolis, Kelly Chauvin, that promptly divorced him, probably because she didn't, they went after her. Ironically, Kelly Chauvin, in her prior marriage, had been reprimanded for writing a bad check. How ironic. So ironic. So there's the one clip, he's very soft-spoken. At the end of the incident, in footage that wasn't shown, he says he was a sizable guy and we thought he was on drugs. The knee on the neck, which of course there's also camera perspective bias, so
Right.
It wasn't always on the neck, it was in that region.
Right.
That's also overlooked. It's funny how they stressed, gotta believe your eyes. Obi-Wan Kenobi said, do not believe your eyes, for they will deceive you.
Well, and perspective on camera is everything. You could make a mountain look like a molehill when you use the camera with the right perspective. Point of view becomes everything. I'm an actor and I'm a filmmaker, and I can tell you that is absolutely true.
Right.
You can make things look very differently depending on how you're shooting them.
Darnella, we bank on her footage, right? That is 10 minutes. We miss the whole 10 minutes of George acting like a pussy bitch, whiny. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know who Daryl Davis is. He has been integral in crossing the bridge or speaking to KKK members. He was on Tim Pool, and he reminded me, well, he was saying that only Black people get this talk, but we all get this talk. I got this talk. You get arrested, you put your hands on the wheel, you turn off you don't you do not resist this much,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's not the way you behave. And at one point, and I say this a lot in interviews, at one point he says, I think I need some water. And I joke and I say, oh, would you like a menu? Would you like to
Right.
order some food? Can you imagine? If you look at that, and I think I did, if I resisted that way, I would be faulted. So why in this case is it okay when he was resisting and he's been in plenty cop cars? I have all his mug shots. This is a career criminal,
Right.
justifying his death in any which way or form, but he knows better. Just like he didn't have ID, because that's a little tip that crooks don't carry their ID with them. And if you pay attention to there's a park police officer that's ostensibly babysitting Maurice and Shawanda as this is occurring. So the park police officer, Peter Chang, says to Maurice, what's your name? And he goes, Ricky Ricardo. So if someone told you that, Faust, or me, like, dude, that's not your fucking name.
Right, of course.
Right. But when I told my contact at Cup Foods, he goes, they use code words. So that could have been a code word. Then when I was interviewing Ed Cherini, who's an independent investigator that's done extensive work on school shootings and was leaked a Homeland Security document about an operation, he told me something, this is wild. He said that the Desi Lou Productions, Lucille's son, that they help produce these false flags. So that is very far out. But then when I told him, he said, Ricky Ricardo, he goes, there you go, the reference to Lucille Ball. And Maurice, over and over again to Peter Chang, goes, ask Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam knows I'm cool. Mr. Adam, like, why are you cool? Why? So they leave with they got the cigarettes. They're in the car. It's a holiday. On 2 occasions, the kids that work at Cup Foods come in and they don't talk to George. Clearly Maurice is in charge. And if it happened to me, like, here's a 20, it's a holiday, go leave us the F alone, right? And then you would be thinking, if you say no, you would be thinking they might call the cops on me. Let's leave. But they don't leave. And when the cops arrive at 808 Thomas Lane and Alexander Kang, Maurice's door is opened across the street and there's no, oh shit.
Yeah, there's not. And they're wanted felon. What's his name was a wanted felon, wasn't he?
Maurice?
Yeah.
Maurice had an outstanding warrant. So also think of this. He escapes. On June 2nd, he's caught in Houston as a fugitive out of state. On June 3rd, the case is sealed, the charges are dropped, and he is found to have the beginnings of intellectual disability. And the day after that, he's doing Good Morning Fucking America, just like all mentally ill people, crooks do, right?
Are you serious?
Yes.
So he took off and was found in fucking Houston in Texas, even though he had an outstanding warrant and was obviously involved in every step of the way of this, and was there that day.
Who gave the guy, and Maurice, when I spoke to him and he didn't, I'm assuming he knows who he sussed me out. Maybe that's why he's not responding. But he said to me, if I'm so bad, he told me, the woman who really owns that car, because by the way, George Floyd owned a Dodge Ram, did not own that car. They scrubbed, who is they? They scrubbed the VIN records of who owns that Mercedes-Benz.
Wow.
So he told me the woman, who I know her name, who owns the car, and Courtney Ross, who's a Marvel character, by the way, who's the supposed girlfriend, that they don't like Maurice. And he said to me, I'm such a bad guy, why would George on his deathbed say, Reese, I love you? But if you listen to the the interactions and George Floyd's script, or the words he says, just consider, again, watch it with the lens of he knew he was going to die, and this is a self-sacrifice. The Sinaloa have a Sente Muerte, where they do an homage to the saint of the dead.
Yeah.
Freemasons do have a cornerstone ritual.
Right.
Of course, there's a lot of debate. I was debating with a gentleman, Jim Price, who was a 32nd Scots Rite Mason, who says that none of this symbology exists and that it's all kind of hearsay.
Right.
And there's no truth.
I think it depends on the Mason.
Right. It depends, I guess, on the Mason. And also we were arguing with him that maybe, because the 33rd is like an honorary, and that maybe they didn't, even though he was 32nd, they didn't deem him.
No, they gotta know that you are down for whatever. Let's just say that.
Exactly.
If they're gonna initiate you into the
and the people, well, Benjamin Crump is a boule, and there was on 38th Street another Masonic lodge. The building that burnt down where El Nuevo was housed was a iconic Oddfellows building from 1808. Interestingly, as an aside, in looking at the 10 plus businesses that Maya Santa Maria owns, she owns a funeral home. And there was a Masonic lodge across the street, and I found an order for 34 coffins coming from China via Vietnam. And why do you need to bring your coffins from China? What are you bringing in those coffins? What's really in those coffins? One of the red flags that set me down this rabbit hole of obsession of really wanting to understand what happened is was watching Bridget, a supposed sister, that was wearing an I Can't Breathe shirt the day after. And I was like, is print shops an essential business? Where'd you get that shirt, honey?
That was quick.
Did someone FedEx it overnight? Here's your sibling's last words to wear on your chest? Or is that—
Are you fucking serious? She was wearing it the day after?
Oh yeah, she was. So that's when I went and I did a search for I Can't Breathe, Benjamin Crump, George Floyd, and I found, Eric Garner also said I can't breathe 11 times. What a great slogan to circulate when you're bringing in these masks. So that was a red flag. Also, I called the day after, on the May 27th, I interviewed Giovanni Thunstrom, who was the other employee. And I noticed the broad talking points, like, he was strangulated. That was urine. Because I don't know if you noticed the liquid that was coming out. When I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, did the guy piss on himself?
Yeah.
And it's exhaust, and it black, white, worked inside, worked outside. It was like, and in the police report, it says public narrative. It says the public narrative. So are these broad talking points. And the way I got into the story was I was in the jungle, and Zach was like, Mimi, can you come and choke me? And
can you come kneel on me?
And he's like, I'm doing the George Floyd challenge. And then I said, well, we have to call the medical examiner. And when I called the medical examiner, they told me it's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks, which is how a real investigation. And yet literally hours later, CNN was seeding discord to start brewing these riots, and said that there's other evidence, and it wasn't indicative of police brutality, and that's what fired up the mob. So I mean, would you think, is it co-opted? When I talked to you about the body identification process and how quickly also, so Darnella says in Facebook the day before that she's going to drop this video in the morning, but then she ends up dropping it. How did it go viral, right? So I found the journalist who I believe, helped break the story. And when I reached out to him, he's like, I wouldn't say that. Listen, I'm not driven by money, but if you told me, did you break this story? And I had, I would definitely be telling you, because I would want credit for breaking a story. But the way in which, and also Darnella uploaded the footage to a service that helps you monetize, like a citizen journalism. And I was like, I've been a journalist for 25 years. I've never heard of this site. How
Right.
the fuck did she know to go and upload it
Yeah.
here? Right? This is a 17-year-old who the day before says, Rona was fun, but I got to stack my money back up. And with
Yeah.
$712,000, honey, you've stacked your money. Good
That's
for
for
you.
sure. Yeah. It's sad. But the work you're doing is incredible. I wish I had more time. I have to go pick
Oh
up
yeah,
my
yes,
son.
yes, yes.
But send me those links, and I'm going to, we'll use them in the edit, and we'll include them in the video description.
Okay, awesome.
I appreciate your time. I love being updated on all the incredible work you're doing. I hope I get a chance to catch up with you soon. I don't know if I'm going to go to Beverly Hills for the biohacking conference, but I might.
I'm not going.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of far, and it's kind of too far in
There's
California.
one in there's a biohacking congress in Miami.
Oh yeah,
Stephen told me about, but I don't look at the dates.
yeah. I'll
And
check out the dates for
you're
that
going to
one.
be closer over
Much
here,
closer, yeah,
right?
yeah. Then, so I don't know
Good
what they're
luck.
thinking. Yeah, thank you.
What, in Beverly Hills?
Yeah, I don't know what are they thinking. I don't. What?
It's a moldy building, by the way, the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Oh,
I when the when the biohacking conference was like pre-Rona
yeah,
in Los Angeles, I personally I couldn't make it through the weekend.
right.
A day
Yeah,
in AC and a moldy hotel, and I can't.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure that there'll be one of these conferences. I got to check the dates on that one, but I'm going to be closer to you anyway once I get down to Georgia. So
Yeah, good luck with your move.
thank
I
you so
know
much, and I
how
appreciate your time.
colossal it is, and I
Yeah,
appreciate your time,
you're
Faust.
welcome. I'll be in touch soon.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
God
sweetheart.
bless. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I appreciate it. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.